Hello, my name is Peter, and this is my son.
Kellen.
And we are here to encourage you to get closer to God's written word, Torah, and his living word, Yeshua, and by doing that in Hebrew. This is our first time back from Israel. Last week we were filming on the eve of Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day in Netanya. And that night, after filming and Kellen had gone to bed and I was up editing, and I thought I'll go down to the front desk, see if we can get checked out. So avoid the rush in the morning. And I met the desk clerk there, and we got to talking about Torah and Hebrew, and he was wondering why a Gentile would want to learn Torah. You know, why my son and I traveling to Israel. We don't have any relatives there. The only friends we have there are people we're meeting. And so I quoted Isaiah 2 verses 2 to 3 for him, and he got so excited. He's one of the people that can understand biblical Hebrew. And just then Ezra came in because he meets nightly with the owner, Mike. And the clerk goes, "Oh, you gotta sit down with Ezra and Mike, and you gotta join them." So he introduces us, and Mike, the owner of the hotel, left Czechoslovakia in 1938. So all his family died after he came to Israel, died in the Holocaust. And so Ezra and Mike and I were talking Heblish for a couple hours, and I'm trying so hard to stay in this conversation and explain to them why there are Gentiles around the world that are opening up to Torah. And they got that. And then Ezra says to me, "Well, you need a rabbi. You need a rabbi." And he got out, he went to the kitchen, got his siddur, and he showed me the morning prayers and started talking to me about that. And then he's like, "You need a rabbi." And I said, "Well, Yeshua is my rabbi." So then Mike and Ezra went off on a long thing, which I was mostly able to follow, about the church and the history of the church and Yeshua. And the end shot of it all was, after a couple hours, Mike said that anytime I stay there, I can get free drinks, coffee, juice, or wine, or whatever. So it was fun. So this is Torah portion Tazria Metzora, beginning in Leviticus chapter 12. You can like and share our Facebook page, Torah in My Heart, and our website, torahinmyheart.com. These are the resources Kellen and I used to learn to read Torah in Hebrew. We did it on our own, and you can do it on your own too. It's better to have a group, but these are the resources that work. On our videos page, you can find this video and all the others. If you're just happening upon this video now, we recommend you go back to the beginning, back to Bereshit, and especially start with the video, How to Read Hebrew. Work your way forward from there. Memorize this chart. It explains how Hebrew, both modern and biblical, conjugate verbs. Hebrews chapter 8 gives the definition of the new covenant. And one of the parts of that definition is that God will write his law on our heart. The passage is quoted from Jeremiah 31, where God says he will write his law on the heart in the new covenant. And the Hebrew word there for law is Torah. I was looking at an old Facebook post from 5 years ago, and it's a group of people sitting around, and you get the idea. One of them's a new believer, and he says, now, let me get this straight. God's people failed to keep his law, so he sent his son to abolish his law. And, that's kind of the understanding that we have in the church. I had that understanding for most of the first 50 years of my life. And then about 10 years ago, somebody showed me about Torah being written on the heart. And so God's law has not been abolished. It's part of the new covenant. Now Kellen will read Leviticus chapter 12, verse 2 in detail.
Daber.
Davar is to speak, and it's in the PL form, intensive active.
El Bnei Yisrael.
El means to, and Bnei Yisrael is a construct chain we've had many times. The sons of Israel, the people of Israel, the children of Israel.
Lemor.
Amar, to say.
Isha.
A woman. The word for man would be ish.
Ki.
It can mean that, because, or when, but here it's translated if.
Tazria.
The root zara is to sow, and in the hefil form, it means to yield seed, or in our case, to become pregnant.
Veyalda.
Yalad is the root for to bear or beget, and the he suffix means she bears. She bears a child. This root is used in the Hebrew expression Yom Huledet Sameach, happy birthday. And it's interesting, the word order in Hebrew is exactly opposite of our phrase. We say happy birthday, and Sameach, happy, is the last word in Hebrew. Birth is the middle word, Huledet, and Yom is the first word in Hebrew. That would be a passive form of Yalad because you were born.
Zachar.
A male child. We'll see Nekeva as a female later in this passage.
V'tam'a.
Tama means to be unclean, and it's spoken of as tumah for unclean, or tehorah, pure or clean, as the opposite. Also, this same root is the last word in our verse. We're going to find out that being unclean is not really a bad thing, since it happens from doing good things. For example, here the woman is having a baby. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a blessing to have a baby, and yet she becomes unclean.
Shiv'at yamim.
Here's a construct we'll see again a couple times. Shiv'at yamim, 7 days.
Kime nidat devota.
Ki is translated here as. Ki me is as in the days. Nidat devota, the impurity of her menstruation. Now, Kellen and I normally don't use the transliteration of Ben-Gigi anymore. We each used it for a couple years as we were learning how to read Hebrew. And we recommend it for you when you're learning how to read Hebrew. But we don't really use it anymore. But this word I looked up. And here it is, devotah. That vav is both a consonant and a vowel here, which is pretty unusual. And here it's devotah is the pronunciation. Thank you, Ben-Gigi's transliteration, for explaining that.
Titma.
Here's that tama root again. And notice that the first time, vetam'a, that was perfect, meaning action has been accomplished. And this time, it's titma, meaning imperfect. Now, the way to tell the difference on your own is notice the first one, vetam'a. Notice that it's got a he suffix. The he comes after the root. and that means it's been accomplished. That's how I remember it. It comes afterward, it's been done. But in the last word in this verse, titma, you see that tav comes before the root. Now both the prefix tav and the suffix he mean she, or third person feminine singular. But by the prefix coming before the root, that means it's imperfect. It hasn't happened yet. So if you understand what I'm saying, the suffix comes after the root, it means it's happened. The prefix comes before the root, it hasn't happened yet. Perfect, imperfect. When you have correctly translated and pronounced each word, take away your helps.
דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, אישה כי תצריע וילדה זכר וטמאה 7 ימים, כי מנידת דבותה תטמא. Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a woman among you conceives and bears a male, she is to be unclean 7 days. As the days of her menstruation she shall be unclean.
Now we're going to listen to Dan Bury in his recording of this verse, 50%, so half speed. And I want you to listen specifically for how he rolls the R on lemor. Then on Tazria, how he gets that he kind of makes that guttural sound for the ayin. And then for devotah, 2 things. One, he pronounces it as Danny Ben-Gigi's transliteration said to. And secondly, the dagesh and the he, he pronounces that as devotah. A little bit of a there.
דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, אישה כי תזריע וילדה זכר וטמאה 7 ימים, כי מנידת דבותה תטמא.
Next week is Torah portion Acharei Kedoshim, a double portion like today, beginning in Leviticus 16, verse 1. Now a few more verses from these Torah portions, Tazria Metzora.
וביום השמיני ימול בשר ערלתו. And in the 8th day you shall circumcise the flesh of his foreskin.
The ceremony where this commandment is fulfilled is called a Brit Milah, or it might just be shortened to a Brit. If you hear a Jewish person talking about a Brit, this is exactly what they mean.
ושלושים יום ושלושת ימים תשב בדמי tehorah בכל קודש לא תיגע ואל המקדש לא תבוא עד מלאת ימי tehorah. And 33 days she shall dwell in the blood of her purification, and all holy things she shall not touch, and to the sanctuary she shall not come until is fulfilled the days of her purification.
This is a case where English is more efficient by saying 33 days. In the Hebrew it's ushloshim yom and 30 days, ushloshet yamim and 3 days. And notice the difference here. The ushloshim yom has the singular form of yom, and the ushloshet yamim has the plural form of yom. I'm not sure why that is, but it's consistent. We'll see that in the next verse also.
ואם נקבה תלד וטמאה שבועיים כנידתה ו60 יום ו6 ימים תשב על דמי tehorah. And if it is female that is born, and she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as her impurity, and 66 days she shall dwell in the blood of her purification.
Here we see that similar number form, Veshishim Yom, and 60 days with the singular form of Yom, Vesheshet Yamim, and 6 days with the plural form of Yom. Now this is interesting. Why would a woman be unclean for a week and then 33 days after the birth of a boy, but twice as long after the birth of a girl? We'll take a look at that later. At our old Hebrew class, Vonnie was one of the best, and she has made a recording of Leviticus chapter 12, verse 6, reading that. And this is our opportunity now to induct Vonnie into the Hebrew Tank Honor Society.
Hi, this is Vonnie, and I'm reading from Leviticus chapter 12, and I'm reading verse 6. Uvim lot yamei tehorah laben o labat TV keves ben shanato laola u ben yonah o tor lachatat el patak ohel moed el hakohen. And when the fullness of her days for purification, tehorah, so that's fulfilled for the fullness of her days, for a son or a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering for an olah, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering to the opening the door of the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, unto the priest. And in verse 8, it also talks about if her means aren't sufficient for a lamb, then she can bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And I wanted to talk about that because this reminds me in Luke chapter 2, verses 22 through 24, talking about Mary and Yeshua, that Mary, an observant Jew, or Miriam, and when the days for their purification according to the Torah of Moses were completed, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the Torah of the Lord, every firstborn male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to what was said in the Torah of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. So Mary was Torah observant, and she was following the Torah, keeping Torah, and making sure she did the right thing with Yeshua. And also, you can tell that she wasn't wealthy, that she was poor, because she brought turtle doves instead of a lamb, although she had the lamb with her.
Thank you, Vonnie. That was great. To answer the question about why a woman would be unclean for twice as long after the birth of a girl as after the birth of a boy, let's take a look at this. This is a frame shot from aleph-beta.org. They have excellent videos on these Torah portions, Tazria, Metzora. And in this one, he mentions how the sages say that death is the avi avot hatumah, the father of fathers of all tumah, of all uncleannesses. I suppose right off we can kind of see that when somebody dies, there's definitely uncleanness there. But the similarity between all the others seems to be a separation. There's a loss of life. And it's that loss of life which creates a separation between the person and God. So before they can go into the sanctuary or touch anything holy, they have to go through a period of cleansing, or they might have to do certain acts to accomplish that cleansing. Straight down from the drawing of the corpse here is the woman with the baby just born, and then also the menstrual cycle. Now, what we have in common here with all these types of uncleanness is a separation. So what is the separation here? Well, when a woman menstruates, she loses the ability to give life for that period. When a woman gives birth, she loses the baby that was inside her. It was a soul in a soul. Now the baby has left her body and she has experienced the loss of life. Why then would it be twice as long for a girl? The girl carries within her the ability to be a mother and to experience that loss of life from her as well. So the separation between a woman and her newborn girl creates twice the state of uncleanness as the birth of a boy. And that's one way of looking at it. David Foreman on Aleph Beta also talks about the similarities later in our Torah portion of the cleansing of the leper. There's a ceremony that when he's cleansed, he has to go through it. It involves two birds. One is allowed to remain alive. One is killed. Cedar wood, if you can see a very thin there right between the cedar wood and the hyssop, scarlet thread and hyssop. So those are the elements of the purification process. And what David Foreman does is he shows that there are similarities between the purification of the Metzora, the leper, and Pesach. If you think about it, those are some similar elements of Passover. You have the sacrifice of the lamb and the blood on the doorposts like the cedar wood. And the blood is brushed onto the wood with hyssop. Also, here you have the living bird and the dead bird. And in the last plague of Exodus, of death of the firstborn, the Egyptian firstborn died, but the Israeli firstborns were allowed to go free. Also, there's a 7-day period after Pesach called the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when no leavening is allowed into the camp. And after the purification process of a leper, there's a 7-day waiting period. And another connection is in Leviticus 14:3 is one example of the root negah, plague, the plague of leprosy. That root is found 60 times in our Torah portion, but it's found only once as plague in the book of Exodus, and that's chapter 11, verse 1. And he said, Hashem to Moses, there is yet one more plague I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. That word negah there is the only translation of negah as plague in the book of Exodus. So that's a connection tying the Metzora with Pesach. Yeshua is that sacrifice of the Passover lamb. And also, when I was a new believer in the summer of 1981, I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Brand new believer. I had no other believers around me. An unusual set of circumstances how it happened. And I was with some friends who were no longer my friends because I'd become a believer. But I just loved the time to read the Bible. It's when I first got into the book of Proverbs and Matthew. I loved to read them. I went to a church. I don't remember what church it was in Santa Fe, but the man was teaching on Sunday school about this Torah portion, the ceremony for the cleansed leper, the two birds, the cedar wood, the scarlet thread, and the hyssop. And he talked about how Yeshua, Jesus, he said at the time, fulfilled both of those, one by being the sacrifice and two by ascending into heaven. And it was a rich time. Just a really, 40 years later, I remember that. Well, it's not 40 years yet, but almost. And it was a real blessing to be hearing that and to be so encouraged as a new believer. Now just 2 verses from Isaiah 66. Beterem tachil yalada, beterem yavo chevel lach, vehimlita zachar. Before she goes into labor, she gives birth. And before labor pains come upon her, she delivers a male. Mi shama kazot, mi ra'a ka'ele, hayuchal eretz beyom echad, im yivaled goy pa'am achat, ki chala gam yalda Tzion et baneha. Who has heard something like this? Who has seen such as these? Can a land be born in a day? Can a nation come into existence at once? For as soon as she goes into labor, Zion gives birth to her children. So last week when we were in Netanya, it was Yom HaShoah, as I said, and the Shoah, the Holocaust, led just a few years later to Israel being established as a state, because Jews realized they weren't going to be safe in this world unless they could have a country of their own. And they did get their country 70 years ago, 1948. And this week, even though it happened in May of 1948, it's being celebrated this year, 2018, in April, because they go by the Jewish calendar, and it's the same date in the Jewish calendar. And here's a newspaper from 1948, May of 1948, the Palestine Post, which was a Jewish newspaper because anyone living in that area was called a Palestinian until about 1960, when the Arabs took that title for themselves. So here's the Palestine Post, a Jewish newspaper. State of Israel is born. It happened in a day, just like Isaiah said it would. The Isaiah scroll, the great Isaiah scroll that Kellen and I like to go read in Jerusalem, and he's better at it than I am, by the way. That scroll was put into a cave probably about the 1st century, and that's the same time that Israel went into exile. 70 AD with the Romans. They went into exile, and then again in 132 when Rome finished off the job. Well, that Isaiah scroll was discovered in 47, 48. It was discovered in 47, I think, or 46, but it took a while before people realized what it was, and it got into the hands of the right people. And so right at the founding of Israel as a nation, the book that talks about Israel being founded in a day came out of the ground at the same time. It went into exile the same time Israel did, and it came back out the same time Israel became a country. I think this is one of these letters that you get from God. It's like stamped, pay attention. This is something we should be listening to. And this is partly why the book of Isaiah is so valuable and so important to us. I think right now we need to pay attention. Isaiah is for today, not just Torah, but Isaiah also. Vonnie, who read from Leviticus, is now going to do our closing prayer.
Okay, I'm going to now read the Avinu Shabbat Shemayim. I don't have it memorized like Kellen, so I'm going to read it. Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, Yit Kadesh Shimka, Vayit Barek Malchutka Retzonka Yihye Asui Bashemayim Uva Aretz Vatiten Lachmenu Tamidit Umechol Lanu Chatotenu Kaasher Anachnu Mo Chalim Lachotim Lanu Vaal Tivienu Lidei Nisayon Vashamranu Mikol Ra. Amen.
Now, just the last couple days has been the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence in May of 48. So there's a video I want to show now which is connected to both. And what it is, it's a Gentile guy named Roddy Edmonds who stood up for about 200 Jewish men that if it weren't for him, they would have been put to death. You know, there's an expression, I had a gun to my head. You know, I had to do it because I had a gun to my head. Well, Roddy Edmonds literally had a gun to his head, and he refused to give up the Jews. And to think that a man could be in his 20s and to be that brave and to have such an effect, because these 200 men went on to survive the war, most of them, and they went on and had children and grandchildren. So what an effect this one man had, and I think you'll enjoy this story. So until next week, and Torah portion Achrei Kadashim, Kel and I wish you Shalom.
Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. It was an act that defied the Nazis' demonic regime during World War II. One man saved 200 American Jewish prisoners with these words, "We are all Jewish." Now, more than 70 years later, U.S. Sergeant Roddy Edmonds is being honored posthumously. The Jewish Foundation for the Righteous will officially bestow the honor, and Sergeant Edmonds' son, Pastor Chris Edmonds, will be there to receive it. Pastor Edmonds joins me now. Welcome.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good to be here.
This is an amazing story that actually makes me weep every time I hear it. And it took place during the Battle of the Bulge, 1944. Your father was the highest-ranking officer of the prisoners, and then what happened?
He was asked the night before of the particular incident to just send forth the Jewish POWs, the Jewish Americans, on the following morning's roll call. And he turned to his men and he said, "We're not doing that. Tomorrow morning we all fall out." And so he sent orders to all 5 of the American barracks and said, "All of us are falling out tomorrow," even though they'd received the same orders he had received. And all of them did, which is amazing, because all those men were heroes. They all stepped out with my father. So the commandant comes out of his quarters and he sees over 1,200, nearly 1,300 American POWs standing together in sharp formation, and he's enraged. So he storms over to my father, and he gets up in his face and he says, "They cannot all be Jews." And my father just calmly replies, "We're all Jews here." And he really gets angry then and pulls his Luger and presses it into my father's forehead. And he says, "Sergeant, you have one last chance. You will order the Jewish Americans to step forward, or I will shoot you right now." Well, Lester Tanner, one of the POWs who lives here in New York, shared with me and said, "Your father didn't waver." He said he just calmly looked at the major and said, "Major, all that's required is name, rank, and serial number. But if you shoot me, you'll have to kill all of us, because we know who you are, and you'll stand for war crimes when we win this war, and you will pay." And wow. And Lester said the major just turned, he blanched, he turned white.
Were you aware growing up that your father was this hero? I mean, he was only 25 years old when this happened.
No, I mean, he was always my hero, and he was always active and involved in things that we did as children and growing up. But no, he never shared this. He was like many of the greatest generation. He came back from the war. He got married, had a family, loved his country, he loved God, he loved his family, and he moved on. I don't know how he did it. You know, with the horrors I know about now, I don't know how these men came back and just became so fruitful and productive in their lives. And but he never shared. The only thing he would ever share with me as I grew up as a teenager and a college student, I said, "Dad, tell me about your POW experience." He said, "Son, some things are too horrible to talk about." He said, "I will just tell you we were humiliated." And that's all he would ever say. And so he never shared, not even with my mom. He never shared about what happened in the camp.
You know, what does it mean to be given the honor of the righteous by a Jewish foundation?
Well, as my dad was a infectious Christian. He loved people. He loved God. For him, it is a great honor. He truly did live a life, I think, that's a fitting tribute to be called among the righteous. It doesn't surprise me that he did what he did. And to be honored by the nation of Israel with their highest honor to non-Jews is an incredible honor, and I think one of the highest, if not the highest honor he will receive this side of eternity.
Why do you think it took so long? It's been over 70 years, and we are just now beginning to understand what this man did, and many people don't know of him as a hero. Obviously, from now on they will, but why do you think it took so long?
Well, what I've discovered, and I think what we as a culture have discovered, is that these men really made a commitment to the armed services not to share, and they honor their word. And then the other thing is, some of the things they experienced were so horrible that it took many, many years for them to process, and only began to share their experiences with their grandchildren. And many of these men that I've met who are living POWs, they said the first person they told was a grandchild. And now many of them are sharing in schools and with other community groups, which is wonderful. But I really do believe it was such a, they put it away in another compartment, and now that their grandchildren have asked about it. And when I was interviewing one of them, one of the children was there with me while I was interviewing. She said, "I've never heard any of this."
Wow.
And she said she was amazed. But it was like he was reliving it. He was back there.
Wow. Pastor Edmonds, well, thank you so much, and congratulations on your father finally being honored as one of the righteous.
Thank you, and I just want to say thanks to the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous for the incredible honor and for taking me to Germany and Belgium and being able to retrace his steps. So it was an experience of a lifetime.
I'm sure it was, and we'll be hearing more about it, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you for being on, watching A Spirited Debate, and we'll see you the next time.